What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. Look, we need to talk about something that's been brewing with the Blue Jays roster because there's a real situation developing here that nobody's really addressing head on. The outfield is getting crowded, and if Toronto actually pulls off what they're trying to do right now, some guys are going to have to go. That's just reality. So Anthony Santander's back healthy, right? Last year, he was basically living on the injured list, but now he's ready to roll for the full season. That already changes the equation because suddenly you've got a guy who needs everyday at-bats who wasn't taking them up last year. Now throw in the possibility that they land Kyle Tucker or maybe bring back Bo Bichette, and you've got a serious problem. A good problem, sure, but still a problem. Think about it this way. You've got Santander, you've got Springer, you've got Guerrero obviously locked in. If Tucker comes in, he's playing right field every single day. There's no rotation there. He's too good. So now where does that leave guys like Nathan Lucas? Where does that leave David Schneider, Joey Loperfido, Myles Straw? These are all guys who saw significant playing time last year when there were injuries and when Bo was in the lineup. But now there's just no room. And here's the thing that I think management has to be thinking about right now. You can't just keep all these guys on the roster hoping for injuries. That's not a strategy. These are quality players who could be getting regular at-bats somewhere else, and more importantly, they're assets that could be flipped for something Toronto actually needs, like bullpen help. Because, let's be real, the bullpen is still a question mark, and having 4 backup outfielders isn't going to win you games in October if your relievers are blowing leads in the 7th inning. Let's start with Joey Loperfido because I think he's the most likely candidate to get moved. He's young, just 26, and in his limited time with the Jays last year, he absolutely raked. We're talking an OPS near 879 in 96 at-bats. Small sample, yes, but that's exactly what makes him attractive to other teams. They can sell themselves on the potential, convince themselves they're getting a breakout player. And for Toronto, what's the downside? You trade a guy who realistically isn't going to see consistent playing time anyway, and you get back maybe a middle relief arm or a prospect who's a few years away but could be special. The thing with Loperfido is he doesn't have the emotional attachment that some of the other guys have. He hasn't been around long enough for fans to really latch on to him like they have with others. That makes him easier to move from a PR standpoint. And when you're talking about a guy with 6 years of team control, that's valuable currency. You could absolutely get something useful back for him. Now Nathan Lucas is interesting because he's basically the opposite situation. He's 31, going on 32, but he also just had one of the most impressive stretches of any Blue Jay down the back half of last season. When he finally got regular playing time, he didn't just survive, he thrived. He was hitting second in the lineup consistently, playing solid defense and putting up an OPS plus of exactly 100, just a completely average, reliable professional hitter. So the question with Lucas is, do you trade him while his value is high, or do you keep him as insurance? Because here's what you know about Nathan Lucas. The guy spent years grinding in the minors, never complaining, always ready. If he's on your bench and you need him in June because someone pulls a hamstring, he's going to give you quality at-bats. He's not going to pout. He's not going to demand a trade. He'll just do his job. That's worth something. But the counter-argument is that other teams saw what he did too. And if you're a team that needs a 4th outfielder, someone who can actually contribute and not just take up a roster spot, Nathan Lucas looks pretty good right now. He's got team control through 2031. He's proven. You could absolutely sell high on him and bring back another piece that fits better with where this team is trying to go. Myles Straw is probably the trickiest one to move, and honestly, I'm not even sure they should try. Yeah, he's got a contract, about $7.4 million this year, with a couple club options after that. For a team like Toronto, that's not a huge deal. But if you're trying to trade him to Tampa or Pittsburgh or Oakland, teams that are watching every dollar, that becomes a sticking point. They're going to look at that salary and ask themselves if they really want to commit that money to a guy who's primarily a defensive replacement. But here's the thing. Myles Straw put up 2.9 WAR last year. That's legit. That was his second best season by that metric, and he did it almost entirely with his glove. If you're a team that has defensive issues in the outfield, and let's be honest, there are plenty of those teams out there, Myles Straw solves a real problem. Think about a team like the Yankees, who've had defensive struggles. You plug Straw into center field as a late-inning replacement, and suddenly balls that were falling in for hits are getting tracked down. That's valuable. The return wouldn't be huge. You're probably looking at another depth piece, maybe a reliever who's had ups and downs but has some decent underlying numbers. Basically, you're swapping one type of depth for another. And honestly, that might not be worth it for Toronto. If you're only getting back a guy who's going to pitch low-leverage innings, maybe you just keep Straw and use him the way you used him last year. Then there's David Schneider, and I'll be honest, I think he's the least likely to go anywhere. Not because he's better than the other guys necessarily, but because of what he represents in that clubhouse. Schneider's a grinder, a team guy, someone who's clearly beloved by his teammates. You saw him hanging out with Addison Barger all last season, becoming part of that young core. And when he did play, he was productive. 188 at bats, solid offensive numbers, and you got the sense he figured something out at the plate. Trading Schneider would be tough from a chemistry standpoint. Those intangibles matter more than people think. But if we're being cold and analytical about it, he's also an asset. If a team comes calling with a real offer for a reliever who can give you 70 innings of solid work, do you at least have to consider it? Probably. But I'd be surprised if Toronto actually pulls the trigger there unless the return is too good to pass up. So where does this all land? If Toronto signs Kyle Tucker, and that's still a big if, then someone's getting moved. They have to. You can't carry this many outfielders and expect everyone to be happy. And more than that, you're wasting assets that could be helping you in other areas. The bullpen still